and welcome to episode 244 of the Book Cougars, two middle-aged women on the hunt for a good read. I'm Emily.
And I'm Chris.
We're together again. I was on holiday on the Cape, which I'm going to talk about in Biblio Adventures, but we are seeing each other for the first time in a couple of weeks across the desk.
It's lovely to be back with you.
Indeed.
And we're going to start off with a thank you to Jill. She's our newest patron over on Patreon. Jill, thank you so much for your support. It really means so much to us.
We really appreciate it. Chris, what are you currently reading?
Well, I'm currently reading a plethora of things. Or how I say that word in my mind, a plethora of things. So I am reading Positive Obsession, The Life and Times of Octavia E. Butler by Susanna Morris. That kind of stalled a bit. I was just reading that when I was commuting, and I only commute once a week, so that kind of stalled. And then it also stalled when I found out from a friend that she was going to be doing an Octavia Butler year of reading all of her novels in 2026, because apparently Octavia wrote 12 novels, which is perfect to read one a month, you know, like Colleen is doing with the Willa Cather novels this year. And I have sworn off taking on year-long commitments in 2026. And of course, I find out about this like 2 days later. I'm like, what universe? You're testing me. So maybe that is another reason why I didn't pick up Octavia, her biography.
Because what you're going to do instead of joining that year-long read-along is just read the biography next year, right? I'm being sassy because Chris asked me to remind her not to take on too many buddy reads, and I'm not quite sure how to accomplish that. So I just thought I would publicly shame her for a minute. I'm just kidding.
Shame is so effective.
Do whatever you want next year.
Just don't take away my library card. Next year I'm just not going to commit to any year-long things.
Like what you just talked about.
Like what I just talked about. So I think I just had to run away from Octavia Butler for a little bit.
Gotcha.
Before I can get back to her with my right mind saying, just read the biography.
Yeah, don't build a mountain, just take one step.
Exactly. And I tend to overbite, you know?
Yeah.
Don't want to do that. So I will get back to that book. It's a pretty short biography. It's very smooth reading, enjoying it very much. I'm also listening to Chasing Beauty, The Life of Isabella Stewart Gardner by Natalie Dykstra. It's narrated by Maggie Meg Reed, and the audiobook is 15 hours, 57 minutes. Let's just call it 16 hours. I just have a couple hours left to go, and I'm enjoying it very much. And listeners who've been around for a little bit know that Emily has already read and listened to this book as well. We are really excited to talk with Natalie Dykstra on an upcoming episode about this fantastic biography.
Yeah, and we went to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum back in July, I think. Is that right? Or was it August? I don't know. Time is flying. But we had wanted to go ever since Chris was in grad school at Simmons University, which is right next door to the museum. And we had a beautiful visit there. I had started the biography. Chris hadn't started it yet. And she just told me before we mic'd up that now that she's finishing it, we must go back to the museum, which I totally agree.
Absolutely. We really have to.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
And then I'm also reading, should I just keep talking?
Sure.
Okay.
You're doing a great job.
I'm also reading Backstage, Stories of a Writing Life by Donna Leone. This is a book that I mentioned last episode is picking up off of the new display at the library. It was an impulse pickup. Has such a great cover, though, of a seagull standing on a pylon with Venice in the background. I love this cover so much. And I assumed it was more of like a craft book, but it doesn't seem to be that. I've read 3 chapters now, and they're all very different. The 3rd chapter, she does talk about writing in terms of a character's motivation, and she uses Jack and Jill as her example. Yeah.
Like Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Oh, how interesting.
Yes. So I'm enjoying it. I really like her writing. She's a very clear, crisp writer. She's been doing it for quite a while, and I wish it wasn't a new book because you don't get to keep these out very long.
Well, you know, a little secret is that our library doesn't charge fines anymore, so you can pull the Feeding Ghosts memoir trick that I pulled and keep it until the library is calling your phone saying, we're now going to take your credit card if you don't get this book back. So, because it's different if you don't return them, then they want you to pay for it. But if you're late, I mean, I always feel guilty because I know somebody else probably wants to read it too.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's going to take me long to read this. And after one of the books that I recently finished, I need books like this.
Yes.
Yes. So
that was foreshadowing.
Look at that. Look at that. You. Yeah. Using those writerly techniques on the podcast.
That's right. Well, I'm currently reading a couple books too, and I had a problem during my vacation that I wasn't expecting. I know on the last episode I talked about the teetering stack of books that I was taking, and you assured me that I also would probably be picking up a few whilst I was there, which did indeed happen. But I read a book I liked so much that I had a hard time then stepping into another book.
Yeah.
Oh, so hard for that to happen on vacation. So I tried a magazine, and then I started reading, like 6 different books, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so the 2 that I'm currently reading, I started on vacation. And one of them is one that I did pick up, not from the stack of books that I brought, of course, but one that I got when I was there from a thrift store of all places that had a great book selection. And it's called An Arsonist's Guide to Writers' Homes in New England, a novel by Brock Clark. And this came out a long time ago, so I'm sure some of you have read it. The cover and the title really caught my eye. And the premise is that the protagonist, Sam, has been in jail for, I think, close to 10 years because he was caught setting fire to Emily Dickinson's house/museum, which, Chris and I have visited several times and have quite an affinity for. And then the rest of the novel takes off where other author homes throughout New England, and there are many, start going up in flames. And I have to say that I got to about page 25 and I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to read this. Not because of the writing. I don't know. There was just something about it that was kind of disturbing on many levels. So I put it down and I picked up a book that's out in October, on October 28th, right before Halloween, and it's called Witches of Dubious Origin by Jen McKinley. We talked to Jen. She's part of the Jungle Red Writers group, so I will put a link in the show notes to that conversation we had over on YouTube. Wonderful group of authors, and she's very funny. I remember that from when we talked to her, and I have read one of her other books in one of her mystery series. She has many series now, including one that has the word cupcake in it. And we all know how I feel about cupcake books. But this, I believe, is a standalone or maybe the start of a new series. And it is about a young woman, Zoe, who's a librarian in Connecticut. And at 14, her mother dropped her off at a boarding school. They don't have a relationship. Her mother has now died. And her coworker brings her a book wrapped in paper in her mother's handwriting addressed to Zoe. And she opens it up, and inside is a thick black book encircled with a 1/2-inch metal band that was engraved with a series of interlocking lines similar to a Celtic knot. The band latched into a decorative hexagon on the front cover. And she tries to open it and she can't, and nobody can. And she has to go to a very special library in the city to get it open using a drop of her blood.
Oh, my.
So that's as far as I've gotten in that novel. And I think this one is going to hold my attention. And it's just perfect for the entering of October and ghosty season, witchy season.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Very good. Yeah, the Arsonist Guide, I DNF that one. I remember being appalled when I first heard about it because, come on, that's just horrific to burn down author homes or any building. But yeah, it didn't catch me. It didn't keep me.
Yeah, it's kind of written as if it's a memoir. And that's what's interesting about it to me, because I do love memoir, but it's a novel. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure. I'll report back. I'll either have read it by next or I won't.
All right.
That's the way it goes.
50-50 chance if you're a betting person.
And then the other was Witches of Dubious Origin by Jen McKinley, and that's out October 28th, so you could pre-order it now.
Nice. And now what about Just Read? What have you finished?
Well, we jointly read The Moonlit Road, a short story in our continuing year of reading from the Penguin Book of Ghost Stories from Elizabeth Gaskell to Ambrose Bierce. This is Ambrose Bierce.
This is him.
Yes.
Finally.
Yes.
And the Moonlit Road. So before we jump into it, thumbs up, thumbs down, sideways. What was your initial reaction?
My initial reaction was WTF. How about you?
I liked it.
Okay.
I did like it. So this one is told in 3 parts from 3 different perspectives, right? The son, the father, and then the mother.
I was listening to it on audio, and each of the chapters is 10 minutes or less. So it's a very short story. And I loved the first chapter with the son. I was like, oh, I am all in on this story. How about you?
Yeah, definitely. So he's in college, right? And
at Yale.
Exactly.
Down the road.
Just down the road from us as we sit here talking. And he comes home because mom has been found murdered.
Strangled.
Yes.
And dad tripped over her. That's how she was found.
When he came back into the bedroom, when he came home.
Right.
And then you get the father's take, the dad, the husband's take, and then in the middle section.
Chapter 2. Mm-hmm.
You find out from his perspective, or at least what he tells himself, what happened, and then what kind of happens to him.
Right.
And then the third is from the mother/dead wife's perspective.
Right.
What happened.
With a
medium.
Yeah, a medium. Thank you.
Communicating with her, which is so appropriate for the time period, you know, to be reaching out to help somebody understand what happened to their loved one or know where they are now. Yeah.
And I think the WTF part of this for me was like, that is dark. It was a dark story.
It was a very dark story. Yes. And I like some of the lines. So I read it on my e-reader, and some of the things I highlighted, there's a line, "Fear has no brains. It is an idiot."
That's the exact line I have highlighted.
Look at that.
Wow.
2 minds.
Yeah, that is a great line.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yes.
And it made me think about current events. And then another one. This is a little bit longer. And this is the wife, the mother. "You think that we are of another world. No, we have knowledge of no world but yours, though for us it holds no sunlight, no warmth, no music, no laughter, no song of birds, nor any companionship. Oh God, what a thing it is to be a ghost, cowering and shivering in an altered world, a prey to apprehension and despair." I thought that was one of the most sad descriptions of being a ghost that I've ever read.
Yeah. Well, when I finished, there's the biographies in the back of the writers, and I was like, what? I mean, I'm not sure I've ever read Ambrose Bierce. I thought, who is this person who's writing this piece? And one of the sentences in his biography said, "Bierce was an infamously mordant and cynical writer. His nickname was Bitter Bierce. A disillusioned irony informs his best work. He himself thought of it in fun as devilish. Satan was his supposed collaborator on his short story, The Fiend's Delight."
Wow.
Yeah, that's a little dark.
Very dark, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this story, spoiler alert, you may have already put things together that the father murdered the wife. You know, he murdered her because he jumped to a conclusion. You know, early on, you're told he has an anger problem and he's very jealous, and something happens and he makes this assumption, and she knows what's going to happen because she is
Afraid,
yeah.
And I listened to it 3 times, and each time I listened to it, I had a growing appreciation for the writing, because there are little... In the first chapter where the son is just, you know, he's off to college and he gets a notification that his mother has died, and he comes home, and then he stays with his father because he is now a, quote, nervous wreck, which I wondered if that was one of the first times that term was used in a story. That interested me. So you think, oh, I think I know the direction this story is going to go. And then it so quickly changed from chapter to chapter.
It really did. And I think that's what kept me going, was those changes in the different characters. And the writing was really just, it carried me along. There's another section I want to read quickly. "What I am about to relate happened on a night. We know when it is night, for then you retire to your houses, and we can venture from our places of concealment to move unafraid about our old homes, to look in at the windows, even to enter and gaze upon your faces as you sleep. And of course, I'm reading this in bed at night, right? All the lights
New
are
England,
off.
where
and I'm
the homes are old and ghosty,
yes.
and yes.
And I thought that is one that I'm sure made a lot of people shiver.
Yes.
It's a good one.
Yeah, The Moonlit Road, Ambrose Bierce. We only have a few to go. Henry James is up next, I believe.
Yes, Henry James is next with The Jolly Corner, and that will be episode 245. And then we have Mary Austin, The Readjustment, and we're bringing it home with Edith Wharton's Afterward.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Those are 3 stories that are left in that big old book. So thank you to those of you who've been sticking with us.
Yes, reminder, there is a thread on Goodreads where you can talk about them anytime, even if you're listening to this podcast episode in 2027, because that's how the internet works. Well, the book that I read that I loved was called A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. This was a novel that we had considered as our Q4 read-along. It has several different covers that I've seen out in the world. The one that I have is a hardcover I got out of the library with a vulture in shadows because it's sitting on the mailbox out in front of this house. And the opening scene is this woman, Samantha, coming home to her grandmother's home in North Carolina. Her grandmother is long dead. I'm going to do a pregnant pause there and let you think about why I'm pregnant pausing there. And her mom lives in the house now. There is a vulture as she arrives to her mother's house. Samantha is an archaeoentomologist, which is a term I had never heard before. I've heard of the term entomologist. So she studies bugs, but she particularly studies them at archaeology digs. And she was sent out on assignment, but human remains were found. And most people are probably aware that if that happens, they often have to stop a dig and call in other people to do more research about the human remains. And so she has sublet her apartment, so that's why she's now come home to live with her mom for a period of time until she gets the okay to go back to her dig. And she arrives and her mother's not looking well, and things start to happen. Talk about creepy things, Chris, like that happen to you when you're sleeping. There are many scenes where she's sleeping and she starts to feel things.
Oh, God.
And creepy stuff happens. It's so well written. And the thing she does so well, which, I'm very new to this horror situation that we're in this year. Like, she puts enough humor in that it keeps you okay with the scary parts. It's not a gory story at all. It involves plants and bugs and vultures, not axes and things like that. I loved it so much. There are things that are creepy, like she keeps referring to the fact that when she did visit that house when her grandmother lived there, her grandmother would say things like, if you don't eat your peas, the underground children are going to come for you.
Yikes.
Yeah. And that might have been foreshadowing.
Wow. Grandma.
So I really enjoyed it. I cannot recommend this book enough. It's called A House with Good Bones. I will also say T. Kingfisher is very prolific. She also writes under the pen name Ursula Vernon. And she has kids' books and sci-fi and fantasy. And this novel did check off the sci-fi fantasy square on our Ghost Bingo card for me.
Nice. Very good.
Yeah. And I think it would have been a fun one to read. So if you're looking for a fun book club discussion, I would recommend this. It was really good.
Very good. Thank you for that. I'm just sitting here thinking, would I rather go up against an axe or a vulture? I had to pause there and think about that.
Well, the vultures, she actually gives you a lot of information about vultures in this novel. And
I wouldn't mess with a vulture.
Yeah, but they're not bad.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a little spoiler, but...
All right. They take care of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I read a very different kind of book. Hot off the press, 107 Days by Kamala Harris. This was a quick, bittersweet read. It is about her campaign when Joe Biden stepped down and endorsed her and taking off from there. She had 107 days to campaign prior to the election, which was insane, really, when you think about it. Some campaigns have basically 2 years to get off the ground. So, it took me right back to the time period and the excitement of what was going on and seeing the building and the momentum of her campaign and how she was filling auditoriums and stadiums with crowds coming to see her. And she talks about behind the scenes, what was going on, what it was like, what was going on with her family. So it opens with her being at home with her 2 grandnieces, hanging out with them. She's going to be making breakfast. Like, they had a whole plan that they were going to get her up at a certain time and for her to make breakfast when she gets the phone call. So it takes off from there. It's very fast paced. And like I said, it was bittersweet to read. It was really good to be back in that excitement, but it put me firmly back in the world of politics and what's going on now and what we could have had versus what we have now. So in that regard, it was a tough read, but I couldn't not read it. A couple of years ago, I read her memoir, The Truths We Hold, An American Journey. That came out in 2019, and I really enjoyed that. This book, as Emily discovered prior to its release, was co-written with a very well-known author,
Geraldine Brooks.
Right. And she thanks her in the acknowledgments. And this is a book that somebody came to her and said, like, you need to write about this experience. And it has everything you can imagine, like I said, from what's going on with her family, like her husband, picking a vice president, like Trump's assassination attempt and calling him. Actually, that's kind of a bit of a tie-in with our current theme of reading ghost stories. She gives a good reference to a horror story when talking with him. She says she called him and, to say, I'm very happy that you're okay and I'm so sorry that happened. And she said, I'd readied myself for a phone conversation with Mr. Hyde, but Dr. Jekyll had picked up the call. And so she talks about how he could really turn on the charm and be such a nice guy, after, just days before calling her all these heinous names, like during a speech that he was giving somewhere. We've all heard some of the things that he has had to say. And I recommend it. If you're interested in learning about what it's like to be in that kind of pressure cooker situation, which I cannot imagine. I mean, talk about like lack of sleep and lack of any personal time. And her people just dropped everything and went for it with her. So she's getting binders full of information and doing so much prep work. One of the really interesting parts is when they were putting her through debate camp and having her prepare for that debate with Trump, the presidential debate. And one of her advisors, I guess, has Trump down pat and can really mimic him well and dress like him and stayed in character as Trump through the whole situation to really not give her a break and to really keep her on her toes, So it's fascinating. Again, I recommend it. If you like political memoirs, you'll definitely enjoy this one. Enjoy might be the wrong word to use. And she doesn't go into a lot of the future. She talks about Gen Z and how they are basically, the hope of the future. And right now their age range is, they're like 13, the youngest, up to 28, I think, is their age range right now. And how we need to support the younger generations with education, and not meaning just college degrees, but also, trade opportunities and other types of training to help rebuild our infrastructure and keep us going in the right direction technology-wise. And then also she talks about listening to people, about how we can get back empathy and regrow our democracy with the ideals that the country was founded on. So again, everyone, that's 107 Days by Kamala Harris, out now. And I know it's narrated by her, the audiobook, but you did you read it on your e-reader, I believe, right? I did, yeah. I read it on my e-reader. I did listen to the other memoir of hers, and she read it, which is great. But I was reading Chasing Beauty, so anytime I have to listen, I was listening to Chasing Beauty, and I didn't want to clog my head with too much in that way. I'm not even listening to podcasts right now to get through Chasing Beauty. Yeah. Chasing Beauty is a great audiobook. Highly recommend it. It really is. And I have it sped up a little bit, which I often do. But yeah, I mean, it's so good on the ears. Yes. And I can't wait to ask the author if she thought about that at all. Because, I mean, it's a big, thick biography. The book is over 500 pages. But maybe that's just her writing style. Maybe she's one of those writers who talks in her head as she's writing.
Well, we'll surely find out when we talk to her.
Indeed.
Well, the other book I read on vacation was Sunny Side Up by Katie Sturino. This has been in Book Cougars headquarters prior to its publication, and it has a great cover. I've been wanting to read it for a long time. It's out from Celadon Press, which is... They started, I want to say, around 2017, kind of around the same time the Cougs started. And they put out about 25 books a year and really market them well and choose very carefully. And I was excited when I saw that they were putting this book out. It takes place over the course of a year, and it's about this woman, Sunny. And the opening scene, Sunny is at Bergdorf Goodman trying on a swimsuit, and she's stuck. And I mean, I've had these experiences in my life. As a matter of fact, I digress, but when I first moved here, I needed to get a wetsuit. I knew nothing about wetsuits, having been born and raised on land in Ohio. And I tried to buy one, like a used one from Facebook Marketplace, and met somebody at Hammonasset, which is our local state park. Yeah. In the, as you do, you meet strangers, out in public. It was a 90-degree day. There was no shade in the parking lot. And I attempt to try this wetsuit on and get it about halfway up each thigh. I'm sweating so profusely and cannot get it off because wetsuits best come off when wet. And sweat wasn't cutting it anyway. Doesn't matter. But as I was reading the scene, I was like, oh, I can relate on many levels to the swimsuit drama. And she is recently divorced. She's gained a lot of weight. She's running a very successful PR company in New York City and kind of undoing a lot of the harm that was done to her self-esteem when she was married. One of the things she has done is met a couple other divorcees. And the reason she's trying on swimsuits is because they're going on a divorcation, going to a tropical climate to just celebrate each other. There's 3 of them. They're all badass businesswomen. And she gets the idea to start her own swimsuit company with extended sizing. Because what happens when you go to most stores, like if you actually want to go to a store and pick up a swimsuit and leave, if you need extended sizing, they'll say, well, you can purchase that online. So she gets venture capital money and goes on an adventure of building this new business whilst also running her PR company. But what I love about this book that's so of the moment is she also, prior to getting married, had been running a very successful online newsletter with a lot of followers, just about her life and about fashion. And her husband thought it was silly, and so she put it aside. And now she picks it back up and starts writing and gets this tremendous following. Think Substack. So many people are writing Substack newsletters now and getting a great following with that. It was really fun. It was really true to body acceptance. There's a line in the book where her newsletter is taking off, and so she's getting a lot of interviews with the Today Show and newspapers. And she says, I'm quoting here, I have a stance on body acceptance versus body positivity. She wanted to stop thinking about things like her body and just start enjoying her life and not let her thighs consume every thought. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciated that, the idea of body acceptance versus body positivity. And the novel is just really wonderful when it comes to that. If you're looking for just a feel-good book with great character development. And also, I happen to be right now working with my son on launching a business. It was really fun to read about someone who was getting venture capital money and just going for what she wanted. Again, it's called Sunny Side Up by Katie Sturino, who, if you recognize her name, you might, because she's also started a very successful business called Mega Babe that has products that support people in larger bodies. Highly recommend. Quick, fun, perfect beach read.
Nice. I love the cover too, with her diving in at the top.
Yes.
Yeah, very nice. Well, I finished Margaret Fuller, Collected Writings.
big mic drop on that one,
Yeah.
like a heavy 750-page mic drop or something like that.
850-page mic drop.
Me.
So watch your toes, everyone. This is a Library of America edition that just came out this year. It's edited by Brigitte Bailey, Noel Baker, and Megan Marshall, who has written a Pulitzer Prize-winning biography of Margaret Fuller, which I highly recommend. I really appreciate all the listeners who read this with me and showed up and talked about it with me. Oh my gosh, I couldn't have done it without them. It was great to have their support. And we all read, I think, different pieces maybe. Not everybody got to everything. And that's totally fine with a big book like this because it had Margaret Fuller's 2 books within it, Summer on the Lakes, and then also Women in the 19th Century. It has a bunch of her letters, journal entries, her published writings, broken down by time period and location, and then some of her unpublished writings. So there's a little bit for everybody, and it would be really fun to, have a table of contents, not just by page number, but have it broken up by year to read. I mean, I kind of broke it up a little bit that way, but not exactly, to be reading like Summer on the Lakes at the same time with letters she'd written around that period or something like that. It'd be really fun to have a resource like that. So if anybody wants to make something like that and share it online, we're happy to get the word out about it. But Margaret Fuller's not easy to read. She had a very unique style. She was writing in the earlier part of the 19th century when writing styles were a bit different. I think the Civil War really changed writing a lot. And, writing evolves. It just does. I'm really grateful to have read this book. And again, thanks to everyone who read it with me.
Congratulations. I mean, this is one that you were hoping to read last year, or you were hoping to have a Margaret Fuller year last year, and then you put it off for a year so you could wait for this to come out, I think, right?
Right. Yeah, this just came out in February, I believe it was. Yeah.
So good for you.
Yeah. So really great. Margaret Fuller, she might be one of those people you want to read about first before you delve into her writing. There is also a novel that we read and we spoke with the author about, Finding Margaret Fuller by Alison Pataki. She was a guest. We'll link that in the show notes so you could listen to that conversation as well if you're interested.
And read a, historical novel as opposed to the other things that you were reading here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, depending on what type of reader you are, you could read the novel first and then the biography and then her works, or, mix it up somehow. But I think if I were to do this again, we started reading in June, so late June, because this spanned summer, first day summer to the last day of summer-ish. Our last conversation was September 20th. I think I would have given myself a little bit more time, but I'm also really happy it's over now. So, TGIF, thank God I finished it. Again, that's Margaret Fuller Collected Writings from the Library of America.
I finished Death at the White Hart by Chris Chibnall. This was a book that when I got a copy of it, I planned to read right away, and then it didn't happen. And it sat on a desk that I could see in Book Cougars headquarters, kind of, like talking to me. And finally, I decided to take it on vacation. Some of you might recognize his name. He was the creator of the show Broadchurch, which was an English television show that has those short series, like 6 parts or 8 parts, I think. And each of the years that they put out were solving a mystery or a murder throughout the course of the series. And they were really tricky. It was intense, that show. And it starred Olivia Colman kind of before her career took off. She's such a great actress. And I cannot remember the name of the gentleman that starred with her, but they just made a great detective pair. And this is a very similar idea in the sense that it is a detective named Nicola Bridge. She has suffered an infidelity in her marriage, and so she has moved back to her hometown from Liverpool. She's moved back to Titcomb, which is in West Dorset in England, and she's thinking this is going to be an easy assignment so she can pay more attention to her marriage. And then no sooner does she take the job than a man is found in the middle of a country road, sitting in a chair that's been murdered. and he has a set of antlers attached to his head.
WTF.
Yeah, exactly. So all of a sudden she's thrown into a murder investigation, which she was a very successful detective in Liverpool, had a great career there. The book has a really great sense of place. There's even a little map in the front. I'll show it to Chris, and who doesn't love a map? We've talked about that. That just shows you these two towns. It's part of West Dorset, and there's a town called Fleetcombe and a town called Breddy. And then there's arrows that point to different buildings that are in the story and shows you where some of the characters, where they work.
Yeah, and where the body was found, there's a big X.
Yes. Body found, country road.
I don't mean to laugh. Why am I laughing?
Because you love a good dead body. We all know that about you, particularly if it's been,
sucked by a vampire.
Exactly. I wasn't going to say it. So I enjoyed it very much. The one disappointment for me was I figured out who did it like really early in the novel.
Now, do you strive to do that, or did it just hit you?
I don't strive to do that. It wasn't like an Agatha Christie type of a thing. It was just like a character said something and I was like, oh, they did it.
Interesting. So was it more of a why done it than a who done it?
Yeah, I would say probably. And also like that feeling of people sweating it out because they're accused of it. And then you have to figure out, like, it seems really obvious that sure, they are the ones that did it. And there's a historical set of 3 murders that happened back, I think it was in 1925, where the bodies were left the same way. So there is that kind of like historical element where there was a family that was accused of that happening, and there's still a member of that family alive and living in the town. The one thing that I really liked about it was the author took this idea of having infidelity in your relationship and how that affects you in your working life, where you can lose trust not only in your partner but in yourself, particularly if you're a detective and you are supposed to be able to see these things happening. And I thought that was a really cool nod to something that you read about a lot, but not necessarily in that way. I don't know if nod's the right word. I think it was clever. So again, it's called Death at the White Hart by Chris Chibnall. He definitely writes characters like I could picture the series Broadchurch as I was reading it. And he also was a showrunner for Doctor Who, for any of you who are Doctor Who fans.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. And it has a really cool cover.
I really like the cover. It looks like antlers, but then it's a road going to the water with a wonderful full moon that's lit. Beautiful.
And a car's coming down the road that's going to discover the antlers in the middle of the road. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
Well, Biblio Adventures.
Well, we went on a fantastic Biblio adventure. A couple weeks ago, we went to the brand new bookstore in Brooklyn, the Twisted Spine.
Yes, the horror bookstore, which I would have never gone to, except that we're reading ghost stories and focused on horror type things. And Aunt Ellen and Chris both love a good vampire novel. And Aunt Ellen was blessing us with her presence on the East Coast.
So you had 2 of us to kind of protect you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sure.
From things that go bump in the night.
Really great store. They have a web presence, so you can find them online.
They are in Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn. A really nice storefront with a skeleton hanging in there, waving hello. And when you first walk in, like most bookstores, they have new shelves, what's new, what's hot. And then they also have this beautiful round table with a lot of classics that have fabulous, just beautiful editions that Emily did a video of that we'll post that kind of goes around the table showing these beautiful editions of classics.
Yeah. Think, pretty editions of Dracula and things like that.
Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you just keep getting drawn back further in. It's a little bit dark. I mean, we were there after dark, I think, by the time we got there because we'd had dinner ahead of time. Beautiful cafe. Chris got a creepy drink.
Yeah, I got a Mary Shelley, which is a green drink. So it's basically a latte. I got it with oat milk, and it's green. And when the barista puts the shot of espresso in it, it looks like blood swirling in there. So it's quite tasty. Very sweet. I don't drink a lot of lattes, but I had to have a Mary Shelley. And the green is, of course, a nod to Frankenstein.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I bought a cookie made with black tahini, so you don't often see a black cookie. I mean, different than like chocolate, you know.
And it was like a s'morgue, right?
Yes, it was called a s'morgue, and it was made by a company called Nefarious Confections, which seems fitting.
You know, they had different sections. I naively thought that there would be a vampire section, but upon reflection, you think vampires are so dispersed through all genres at this point that it would be impossible to have a vampire section or a section just by monster type, you know, because they have romances, they have historical fiction, they have nonfiction, they had a poetry section and short stories, more sci-fi leaning horror novels, more classic type horror novels. It was a really fantastic place to browse because I saw classics, I saw some things that were hot within recent years, and then, of course, things I've never come across before, books and authors and stuff. So I wish it were closer because I would be a regular.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't far from Grand Central because we ended up getting on the train in Brooklyn to go all the way back to Grand Central, and it didn't take too long. So I think you can manage it.
I know, but, you know, it's just nice if it's like your local store.
Yeah. Oh,
and you don't
see.
have to spend like 4 hours getting there and back is what I mean.
I see.
Yeah, otherwise, though, if I'm in the city, it's definitely easy to get to because I came from the Upper West Side.
Right.
And it was an easy commute from up there.
And there were a lot of people in the store, and they have nice chairs to hang out. People were hanging out. They were sitting at the cafe and drinking and eating. Really welcoming, lovely store, even though it's creepy.
And out back, there is a outdoor garden area with tables and chairs that was nicely lit. There's a tree back there, and then they have lights strung. A very lovely space.
And I'm sure that bats will be taking residence very soon. And you got a nice little stack.
I did. I came home. I figured I would get one book, but I saw 3, but they're small. The first one I picked up was Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. And this is a book that I've seen. It came out in 2023, and I've seen it at stores. I've seen it online, and I've always been attracted to the cover, which is quite striking. It is about a gay conversion camp out in the mountains. And, you know, at first I thought, oh, that just sounds a little bit too intense. But I just thought, you know, get it. It was a Bram Stoker Award finalist. It won Best Book of 2023, a Best Horror Book of 2023 from Library Journal, Paste, and Esquires. And it's a young adult, so it'll be a bingo square.
Right on.
Yes, so there's that one. That will be coming up soon. And then this one caught my eye, a vampire novel in verse. It's called The Night Library of Sternendock by Jessica Levi. And I just grabbed it, and I read the back about the author, or a little bit about the novel, but I'd missed the part that says it's a book in verse until I was standing there next to you and Ellen when we were just kind of, maybe I was waiting for my Mary Shelley, I don't remember. And I opened it, I was like, oh, that's in verse. And I thought, okay, I'll take it. It's short and a very different concept, you know?
Yeah.
And then the last one I picked up is a small novella-sized book called Don't Call Mom by Matt Wesolowski, and the don't is in parentheses. And it has a really wonderful, it looks like a painting of a train in the countryside, maybe in the moors. And it's about a guy who's trying to get home from London, back home to Northeast England. There's a bit of a ruckus, and somebody gets on the train, and they're heading out, and they're in the middle of nowhere, and the train breaks down, and things happen. And I like a good train story. So I have ideas of reading these 3 this fall.
I think that's a great idea.
But we know how that goes.
Well, they all seem achievable in size.
Yes. All of these together are shorter than Chasing Beauty by itself. So that gives you an idea that they're pretty short books. And you picked up a book as well.
I did. I picked up a flip book that I left at home. It was a Pete the Cat book, Goes Trick-or-Treating. And this is for my sweet little granddaughter, Nina. And I said to Chris and Ellen, this book looks scary. And they were like, that book is not scary looking. And then I was reading it to Nina just this morning. And she, of course, ripped the very first flip off, like the first page. It's not a board book. She's very good with the board book flip ones. But this one's, the first paper one I've tried with her. And she wasn't that interested in that. I thought she would be because she lives with several cats. But I do think that Halloween is a scary holiday for babies, personally. But, Chris and Ellen.
Well, that's why, I have a sticker on my e-reader that Laura gave me of a bat. And it's of a baby bat who has these big eyes and this cute little smile. So that's kind of like a baby speed image, I think.
Yeah, we don't know what babies would think of that. But I bet baby Chris thought that was really cute. Well, I am back from a whirlwind vacation on Cape Cod, and I did so much, and I'm just going to fly through some of it very quickly. The first thing is I saw so many little free libraries, and particularly right down the street from my rental. We took a walk the first day, and it was probably one of the most beautiful little free libraries I've ever seen. Some mosaic artist made this. It's just beautiful, and there was so much attention to detail on all sides of it. It had a great selection. I ended up dropping Sunny Side Up into it when I finished it. We did a video. It's over on BookTube that shows you the detail of it. It was also in our most recent newsletter for any of you newsletter subscribers. So I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to go see it, or just head over to our BookTube channel. You can't miss it. And then in Wellfleet, there's a lot of art galleries, and outside of one of them was a kid book only little free library that was really sweet. I picked up a couple favorites there, and I took some pictures. I'll post that. And then one of the really interesting things was that a lot of the beaches, and there are so many beaches along the ocean on the Cape, had little free libraries, and they were curated by the public libraries. So that was really cool. And one of them I noticed had a big sign saying, we're now officially closed, we'll reopen in June, and there were no books in it. Some of them had that sign, some of them didn't. And even all the way up to Provincetown, in a parking lot, there's a beautiful little free library that I've stopped at every year I've gone to Provincetown, and that one too is curated by the Provincetown Public Library. And we had passed that one in the morning and there were no books, and we passed it on our walk back in the afternoon. It was filled with books. So seemingly they take their little free libraries very seriously on Cape Cod.
That's great. It's such a vacation destination, so I can see how that's also good outreach for the library in terms of getting people where they are. And it makes me think about how in the 19th century there were a lot of libraries at train stations, know, where people could check out books. That's wonderful.
Right.
I'm so glad to hear
to me,
that.
nothing's worse than having a day to sit on the beach and not have a book, or finishing your book and be like, oh my God, what do I do now? So they had them very well placed.
What, I do not talk to the people I'm with? God.
No. Oh my God. I thought of you so many times. Chris has mentioned in the past that when she goes on vacation, she often brings a reread so that she's willing to talk to the people she's on vacation with. And I'm like, heck no. I want to read.
It depends on what we're doing and who I'm with.
Yes.
Because, look at Chris is reading a 1,000-page book. That will tell you what kind of vacation I might be on. Never mind. I didn't say that.
Your secret's safe with us and all the thousands of listeners.
We readers got to stick together.
That's right. Oh my gosh. And then we stopped at quite a few bookstores. Provincetown Bookshop, which I have been to before, where we picked up a copy of Typhoid Mary by Anthony Bourdain, which I had never seen. I'm so excited. The Gentleman Caller is just lapping that book up right now. Keeps telling me it's really good and his writing's great. So I'm going to get my hands on that next. It's really small. It's like a little square short book.
About Typhoid Mary? About her? Wow.
Because he writes about, he's passed away sadly, but he wrote about restaurants, and it really talks about how, the working conditions she was working in and how she disappeared for a while, never to be found again, and then I think reappeared, and she really was the cause of typhoid, or one of the causes, I should say.
Or like the patient X kind of.
Right, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's better than cause.
Yeah.
They think, I don't know. I haven't read it, and I've sworn Jim to not give me any little tidbits as he's reading it. And then just literally across the street is Tim's Used Books, which is a great used bookstore. And I picked up a copy. Oh my goodness, I was so excited to find this book because the cover is so beautiful. I'm showing it to Chris. This is called Crash Diet, and it's stories by Jill McCorkle. Folks might remember my year of reading short stories every Monday last year, and her short story collection, her newest, was one of my favorites, and I read several from it. This book came out in 1992, so it's my kid's age. It has the most beautiful cover of a woman in kind of an old style swimsuit who's, I think it's like an Art Deco style, wouldn't you say? And she's dipping her toe in the water. And it just caught my eye, and it was for sale for $1.75, and it's one of these old paperbacks. So I'm looking forward to dipping into her short stories.
I love that.
And then we did get to Titcomb's Bookshop in Sandwich. Listener Anne had recommended that to me, and we have passed that bookstore so many times. And I was traveling with Jim and his sister Allison, and we spent so much time in this 3-story bookstore, which has new and used and a lot of vintage books. Chris, I thought of you when we were there. Beautiful gifts. We all came out with bags of things, including Jim finally picked up a copy of Dracula.
Yay!
Which he's been talking to Chris about for years. Also, the illustrator Edward Gorey lived out in Barnstable, and we passed the Edward Gorey house, which I intend to go to next time we're on the Cape, and they had a great selection of his books and books about him. And I saw our buddy Hank Philippi Ryan. Her new book was out front and center. It's called All This Could Be Yours, and she's going to be at Titcomb's on October 15th. If any of you are in the area, she is fun. Highly recommend you go to that event. I did not get to Annie's bookshop. Sorry, Lorraine, who had recommended that. Very Odd Hours. It's in Orleans, Mass. We passed it several times, and it wasn't open. So something to look forward next time. We hit a lot of libraries. I'll cover very quickly the Provincetown Library, which I've been to before, which has a replica of a ship in it. Do not miss that library. It also has beautiful views of the water. And then we went to the Sturgis Library, which Anne emailed me while I was on vacation and said, if you get a chance, go to the Sturgis, which I thought about my buddy Chris. That is a building that was constructed in 1644 for the Reverend John Lothrop, who was the founder of Barnstable. And the house, which forms the original part of the library, is the oldest library building in the United States. So my dear friend Chris Wolak needs to get there sometime.
Absolutely, I do.
Yeah, and it was really cool. It was a rainy day. It has a beautiful book sale right when you walk in, a whale mobile.
That was cool. You posted pictures of that. Yeah.
It's over on our Instagram and our Facebook if you want to check it out. It was really hard to get a picture of the whale mobile. I tried. They had a great art exhibit. Stop there if you get a chance. I also got into the Chatham Library, which I've been to before, and then the South Chatham Library, which was this tiny, tiny building right on the block we were staying in that was open 2 afternoons a week. I think like Tuesday and Saturday from 1 to 4. So we finally got in one day. They have about 4,000 books. They're not part of the other, big public library system in Massachusetts. I think it's called CLAMS. And so they use the old-fashioned index card in the back of the book. That's how you check it out. And they have a card catalog with the card so they can see, who checked it out. And then They have one in the back of the book. And in 2024, they celebrated their 150th anniversary.
Love it.
Yeah. And they've had, I think, 12 librarians in the course of its history.
That's amazing.
And she was telling me that they do, I think, maintain 3 of the Little Free Libraries, beach Little Free Libraries, and that they're very successful. So much art, so much to see on the Cape. I highly recommend it. I will also say that the Cape Cod Book Festival, in partnership with Titcomb's Bookshop, is October 18th through the 25th. Susan Orlean's going to be there. Lots of heavy hitters. Not a lot, actually. I want to say they have like 5 events, but all heavy hitters. I will put a link in the show notes if you happen to be able to get there. I wish I could. It was a great trip. I didn't get as much reading done, but whoever does.
Yeah. That's good to be able to just go with the flow.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah. Well, I had a kind of a biblio adventure. I was up at Barnard College Archives again one day last week and met a friend for dinner up at a restaurant called Osteria Accademia on 646 Amsterdam. Have you ever heard of it?
No, I'm curious.
Well, you'll have to look at their website because they have their pedigree, the association with all the chefs and everything. So it's a second ownership going on right now. But the original owners wanted the whole academia thing is to bring a community together to discuss and talk and everything. And it's a very small restaurant. And two sides are completely covered with books, real books on shelves. Most of them are turned pages out, so it's a calming background. And then the kitchen is on the other side and the front is all windows. Really wonderful. I had a lamb burger.
I love a lamb burger.
Yeah.
Was it good?
It was really good. Yeah, with goat cheese and onions. Really tasty.
Now I'm hungry. Thank you.
I mentioned that because of the books. And then after that, I decided, well, am I going to take the subway back up to 125th Street or should I go down to Grand Central? And I decided to go down to Grand Central to take the train home because I haven't been there in a while. So I took it down to Times Square and walked over to Grand Central, looked at the train schedule. I was like, oh, great. There's one leaving like within 10 minutes. So I had time to have a bio break, as they say. And then I got to the train, sat down, and I'm sitting there. And all of a sudden, all the lights go out. And I'm like, at first, I'm like, did the lights go out? Like, you just don't expect that to happen, right? And then the lights were out. It was complete darkness. And I started thinking of the Dementors. Harry Potter, right? They came to mind. I'm thinking like, do I look into the darkness? Do I want to see something that's coming at me? And then I started thinking of like Stephen King. I think it's The Night Shift where there's rats in the dark,
Gosh.
And I'm like, oh my gosh. But then I started seeing people putting their flashlights on their phones and walking around, and you could see feet walking. And it had that festive air, of like people coming onto the train, like talking in excited voices about what happened and what it was like. And oh my God, I almost fell down the stairs kind of thing. But it didn't affect our train pulling out on time. So
eventful.
Totally
I was
eventful.
on vacation and I think it was Friday. I thought it was Thursday. I don't know. I was confused, but I saw a headline that said that all the lights had gone out in Grand Central on Thursday, and I knew that Chris was going to be there, and so I texted her right away, and she said, indeed, I was on the train when that happened. I'm glad you were one of the people on the train and didn't have to navigate Grand Central in pitch black.
When I was telling Laura, she's like, could you imagine if you were in the bathroom when that happened? Like or it's your first time at Grand Central, and like, oh my God, what is happening? And down below, I mean, when we were pulling out, it was pitch black.
Wow.
Pitch black down there. Because, occasionally you see a light.
Yeah.
And you see the other tracks in the distance and stuff through the pillars and whatnot. So that was quite interesting. And I thought, wow, thinking about books right away.
Yes. I'm glad the Dementors didn't get you.
I am too. But I missed you.
Yes, I missed you too. So do you have any upcoming Johns?
Well, we have one. I think we've mentioned it already, but we'll say it again. October 15th, we are going to see Spunk at the Yale Rep here in New Haven, Connecticut. And that is an adaptation of a story by
Zora Neale Hurston. Yeah, one of her plays. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
And I've never been to the Yale Rep Theater, so I'm excited to get in that building as well.
It'll be fun. And we're going to a matinee, so we'll have to find a place for an early lunch or a dinner.
Yes. And I just signed up for an event at RJ Julia's in Madison on October 27th with Virginia Evans, the author of The Correspondent, which I think is going to be one of my top 10 for the year. And I was thrilled to see that she's coming. That event is at 6:30, and I'll put information in the show notes if you're interested in registering. The event is free.
Very nice. There's another new bookstore in Brooklyn that's opened up. It's a Gladys's Books and Wine. And this is a bookstore aimed at Black lesbians. And Gladys is actually I believe the grandmother of the owner who named it after her in her honor. And there's the New York Times article, and we'll put a gift link in the show notes so you can see that article and some of the artwork.
Yeah, I hope we can get there soon.
Yeah.
How about upcoming reads, Chris?
All right, so one of the books on my list here that we received at Book Cougar headquarters is kind of maybe a good companion to Sunny Side Up. It's a novella, The Dogs of Venice by Stephen Rowley, and he wrote
The Guncle, and the Guncle Goes Abroad.
Right, and so this is a novella about a man whose marriage has unraveled. You know what? Let me just read the blurb because I have a feeling a lot of our listeners are going to like this one. After months of planning a romantic holiday getaway in Venice, Paul is blindsided when his 5-year marriage suddenly unravels. Fueled by heartbreak, he endeavors to take the trip alone. Soon after arriving in Italy, he notices a small, scruffy, self-assured dog trotting alongside a canal with the confidence he so desperately wants for himself. When their paths cross again, Paul feels compelled to learn how his new 4-legged friend thrives on his own. Amid the food, sights, and welcoming people of Venice, Paul's journey culminates in a magical encounter that leads him to feel real connection to a dog, to a foreign city, and most importantly, to himself. I thought, oh my gosh, I have to read this now. This will be a nice way to cleanse 107 Days by Kamala Harris and all that political yuck and read a nice, warm, heartfelt story. I do enjoy his writing, and I love a good dog story. And the cover is just so charming. It's a man on a bridge over the canal with a dog next to him, and the dog's paws on the railing. And it looks like a brown dog. Mm-hmm. I don't know how else to say that. But in the background, there's a building with that Venice facade that makes me think of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum with that structure. And there is a white poodle looking out.
So romance might be coming for the human and the canine.
Possibly, yes.
And this comes out October 14th.
Yes, from Putnam Sons. Order it now. We were joking that Karen will probably have this read shortly after breakfast on October 14th after her copy arrives.
Yes, we can't wait to see your review on Instagram, Karen. No pressure. Well, I have a book that is by an author that we considered for our Q4 read-along. Her name is C.J. Cook. She has several books out, and the one that we were considering was called A Haunting in the Arctic. And I think the reason we ended up not choosing it is it didn't seem like it was readily available in library systems, and that's really important to us. But she just so happens to have a book that's coming out on October 14th, which we discovered as we were reading about her. And her books get really good reviews, and she's well thought of. So this is called The Last Witch. Her voice is the strongest magic there is. And Chris will be thrilled to know that it was blurbed by Stephen King. And he says, pure spooky pleasure. That tells you a lot about the book, doesn't it? Oh my goodness. So it's also blurbed by an author named Amelia Hart, who is the best-selling author of Sirens. She says it's a vivid and haunting portrait of a real-life heroine told in beautifully immersive prose. And this is about a witch who I believe survives a witch trial. So I'm really interested to read this during our, October witchy season. And I think, did I say it comes out on October 14th as well?
Yeah, same day as The Dogs of Venice. And I just looked at the media sheet for The Dogs of Venice, and Stephen King did not blurb this one. Nor did he read my next ones. It is Victober, everyone. Hashtag Victober, which is a big reading event over on BookTube, Instagram as well, where people read Victorian works, whether they're novels, nonfiction, poetry, drama, lots of options to choose from. I'm going to be reading Anne Bronte's Agnes Grey, which has been on my list for a while, and I believe this is the last Bronte book I have to read. I'm not 100% about that. But I wanted to read you the opening sentence or two. I'll just start with the opening sentence. All true histories contain instruction, though in some, the treasure may be hard to find, and when found, so trivial in quantity that the dry, shriveled kernel scarcely compensates for the trouble of cracking the nut.
That's a great sentence.
And then she goes on to say, whether my case will be interesting history or not, I am hardly competent to judge. So one of the reasons I'm reading this now is because I want to read a book that Melinda gave a shout out to me on her BookTube channel, A Web of Stories. The book is Anne Bronte, Nightwalker by Gia Haff. And I know I've mentioned this one before on the podcast as one I wanted to read. I'm bringing it up again now because, again, this is going on my list for, well, I guess not Victober necessarily, but in partnership with Anne Bronte.
Wonderful.
For the horror aspect.
Well, we just posted a video that we will link to in the show notes where we talk about Victober. We also talk about updating our ghost story bingo cards. So if you're interested in seeing our progress on our ghost story bingo cards, head over to BookTube. One of the other books I'm going to be reading is called The Last Resort by Erin Entrada Kelly. And this is going to satisfy the YA square on my bingo card, which I believe will give me bingo, my first bingo. And this is about a young girl who's entering middle school. Her paternal grandfather dies, and they have to head to Ohio for a couple of weeks to take care of his maybe haunted mansion.
Well,
as we're finishing up this episode, it's hilarious to me. We are not accustomed to the light changing, and we're both kind of sitting here in the dark because we didn't turn any lights on when we started. The sun was out. So it seems somehow appropriate as we usher in October.
Absolutely. Now, coming up next is a conversation with our mystery man, John Valeri. We discuss Oscar Wilde's novella, The Canterville Ghost, and a short story by Edgar Allan Poe, The Mask of the Red Death. Two very different stories.
Both of these appear on our Ghost Bingo card, speaking of the Ghost Bingo card. And John, this is his 14th appearance on the book Cougars.
Just can't get rid of him.
No, we try. He's always here.
I know. What are you going to do? But we love him. And John reads a lot of horror. And these are two he hadn't read yet, so he was happy to join us in discussing them. And we hope that you enjoy listening to the conversation.
We wish you lots of happy reading.
For those of you who are new listeners, John is a book critic. He writes reviews and does author interviews and profiles at a variety of different outlets, online and in print, like The Strand, Criminal Element, and more. He also has his own YouTube channel called Central Booking, where he interviews authors as well.
John has been on the podcast many times. On our website at bookcougars.com, we have a tab for guest interviews, so you can see all 14 episodes where John has appeared, this being the 14th. He has come around to talk to us about buddy reads, as we've done today. He's also stopped by to talk about spooky reads for the fall. So if you haven't listened to his past episodes, we highly encourage that you do. We often talk about books, and we always laugh. We're so excited to be welcoming back our mystery man, John Valeri. Sometimes he joins us with a stack of books he wants to talk about, but this time we reached out to him about 6 months ago and asked him if he would be willing to usher in spooky season with us by reading 2 short stories, specifically ghost short stories. So here we are today with John.
Thanks for having me. I was so excited by the invitation. I feel like I don't get to read a lot of short stories. Like if it's not deadline driven, I'm probably not reading it. So this was the perfect excuse and a great start to spooky season. So thank you for that.
You are most welcome. And so the 2 stories that we're going to be talking about are also on our bingo card. We have a ghost bingo card for those of you who've been reading along with us this year. And the stories are The Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe. This was published in 1842. And then The Canterville Ghost by Oscar Wilde, which was first published in 1887. So talk about 2 very different stories.
What I did for both stories was I listened to audio and read them at the same time. I was driving in a car, a long trip, but with very talkative people. And so I wanted to get them read, but I knew that would probably be the best way for me to accomplish it. I just wanted to say that. And so for me, The Mask of the Red Death was narrated by Jack Array. You can find several versions of these, but I will put this particular version in the show notes. And it was free via, I think, Hoopla. So I will put that information in the show notes. So who wants to start talking about it?
Well, let me just say, if you're saying how you experienced this reading, listening, I read the Dover Thrift Edition, just sort of an economically priced paperback. And my goodness, for the Edgar Allan Poe, I had to break out my magnifying glass because apparently I am blind as a proverbial bat. Like, are these words? Like, anyway.
Yes.
I digress.
Well, I got both of mine from Project Gutenberg. And, the beauty of e-reading is that, you can control your font size.
Indeed.
The most wonderful thing. So now I have to ask, Emily, you used the word usher. John's already talked about bats. Are you guys setting us up for the spooky season? Because, there's The Fall of the House of Usher by Poe and bats, of course. I should have worn my bat shirt, even though we are recording audio. My bat shirt.
I know. None of us played except John. Yeah, look at him.
Yeah, he's wearing this fantastic black shirt with orange, scary-looking jack-o'-lanterns on it. It's right. Very eye-catching. It looks
farther in your head than it does on me, so it's probably best this is audio only.
Well, and I should say that I did print mine from Project Gutenberg. So we've covered all the bases. That's how we got them into our sweaty little palms or earbuds.
All right. So on with these stories. Let's talk about The Mask of the Red Death first, since that one was published first. Again, it was 1842. And, basically in a nutshell, it's a very short story. And it's about a wealthy man, Prince Prospero, I believe is his name, who is escaping the plague, living in his castle, and eventually he gets lonely and he decides to have a ball.
As one does in the middle of a plague.
And I know, right? Well, oh my gosh, germ theory was a little bit lagging at this point because, wealthy people couldn't possibly get the plague. It's all those peasants who pollute people, stereotypes of the times, right? That still linger today, talk about horror. But so he has this masquerade ball, which of course is a setup for all sorts of things can go wrong. But his castle structure is like 7 rooms that people have to walk through, and they're different colors. So there's a lot of symbolism going on. And one of the guests is problematic. That's kind of a summary of the story. So what were some of your reactions? Had either of you read this story before, or was this your first time?
I had not, I don't think. I read a lot of Edgar Allan Poe in high school, but I don't think this is one of the stories. And honestly, I think it probably hit differently now than it would have then, having lived through and survived a pandemic. It just struck me as, again, you have this isolation and then you start to bring people in and there are consequences to that. And I think for me, it was just really a reminder that regardless of, your privilege, your power, your prosperity, death can be delayed, but not necessarily denied. And that was really my takeaway from this story.
Yeah, I agree. What I on both of them, I ended up writing the moral. And for this one, I wrote, moral of the story, even if you're a 1%er, the plague can get you, or death in general. Right? Because, of course, it's an allegory also for just death in general. And that's what the plague represents, this mask of the Red Death. The sky comes in and it represents the plague and death. And the rooms, I thought, represented kind of like the stages of life that we go through. And there was a clock, right, at the end that was noting the passage of time or the passage of your life and that it will come to an end.
Yeah, the clock was really interesting because it chimed every hour on the hour. And so there's like musicians who are playing, and every time it tolls, everybody kind of stops and there's this heavy feeling. But then they start playing again and then the party goes on. And it's almost like it's that acknowledgement of death throughout your life when other people die and you're sad and you're confronting your own mortality when that happens. But then you pick up with life again and you don't think about it until the next chime, which for such a short story, I thought it felt subtle looking back at it now.
It felt very ominous to me, but I kind of loved it because, there was this constant interruption, of the party. And it's like, yeah, it's coming for you eventually, but then life goes on until it doesn't.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So can something be ominously subtle?
Well, it was foreboding,
Yes, that's a great word.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought also for such a short story, there was a real sense of place and setting. So well done and so quickly. And it reminded me, John, Chris and I have been reading through this Penguin book of short stories and reading some other, ghosty novels, et cetera. And it made me think about that, like how they set up these places and you have to get that image in your head to really have a sense. Like in my notes, I wrote that it was a twisty, turny palace. You had these rooms and you felt like they had to navigate through them. And that's kind of what set up that feeling of also be claustrophobia almost, like it's a palace, but yet they're guiding you through it in a way that felt tight and close.
And I love that. I love like the atmosphere and the ambiance. And I really am one of those believers that those types of things can be character. I know that some people say, if you're not a living being, you're not a character, but I disagree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. I think I had in mind, and this is not a creepy location at all, but the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, which we had visited recently. I thought about what it's like to walk through very different rooms, and what that does to you psychologically.
It did feel like a museum to me. It almost felt like, walking through a museum. So it's interesting that that's the parallel that you would make. Yeah.
Yeah. And then just this figure, right? This dark figure. And nobody notices the person because it's a ball and everybody has masks on and everything. But I think like as viewers in 2025, we've watched a lot of different movies with that ominous figure that's kind of walking through. This guy made me think of the movie Amadeus. I don't know if either of you remember that one, but there was the cloaked, it's actually his father, but he's in this dark cloak with this mask. And I think we have that in our mind so clearly what that looks like because Edgar Allan Poe set this up over 100 years ago, right? Like he's the one who established so many what are now iconic images in our culture.
Yeah, I can't say I thought about Amadeus, but I understand what you're saying. I'm not sure I've read any Poe. I may have read Poe in high school and blocked it out. I have no idea. I mean, I love some of one of the things I underlined was they're talking about this palace and it had blood-colored panes and the blackness of the sable drapery, and just really, I think, John, were you the one that used the word ominous? Like the words that he used to describe it, an assembly of phantasms. I had to look up a lot of words, I have to admit. Like
a mummer. Damn you for a 5-page story.
Right, I know. I didn't know what a mummer was. I think that's like a mime or a ghost. And I had never heard that word. So anyway, or read or heard of that word. So I had to do a lot of looking up, like you said, for 3 or 4 pages. I was surprised by that. But it didn't annoy me. Oh, no, I'm sorry. A mummer is an actor, like a mime.
Yeah, it has a real nightmare quality to it. I think as so many of Poe's stories do. But this one is so short and immediate that it did feel like a nightmare.
It did. And can I just add, so coincidentally, I've been reading a lot of like spooky season books because I'm going to be doing a roundup for Criminal Element. And one of them, I'm holding it up like, people who are listening can see because I know that you can't. It's audio only, but there's this new book that just came out and I'd been reading it at the same time. And it's called Edgar Allan Poe, The Master of the Macabre by Levi Lionel Leland, which talk about an alliterative name. But it really gave me a historical perspective because they're saying that this story in particular is really an allegory because Edgar Allan Poe's mother, his brother, and then his sort of wife, cousin person, all of them were struck down by consumption and all of them died at the age of 24. And one of the symptoms, of course, was blood and sort of red splotches on the face. And so people are saying that this is an acknowledgement of the consumption coming for people because he was surrounded by so much death due to that. So I sort of read the story even a little bit differently just in reading this short biography of Poe.
Wow. Thanks for that. We'll put that in the show notes, everyone, so you can look it up.
Yeah, it's a fun little book, and it's broken down into snippets, which I love because I feel like sometimes historical biographies can be kind of dense. But this one's like literally a couple pages. It's chronological. It'll talk about the people, the places, the works, but it's very broken down. You can pick it up, you can put it down, and it fits right in the palm of your hand, which I love. You can also use it as a weapon.
Nice little hardcover. That'll be a nice stocking stuffer.
Totally.
Oh.
I'm trying to think of a witty thing to say for a book that's also a weapon, but I can't do it, John.
I'll be doing it at like 3 a.m. So, I'll call you then. I'll call the bat phone.
Well, if no one has anything else to say about that story, the mention of blood is a great way to segue to our other story. The Canterville Ghost by Oscar Wilde. There's a reason that I say that the mention of blood is a good reason to segue, but we're going to keep you waiting to find out why until we get some basics of what people thought about this story.
All right. This story was published in 1887, and it is very different. Instead of being like straight out horror, nightmarish, you're going to die, this is a humorous ghost story about an American family that moves into a haunted mansion in England, and the ghost who has been there for hundreds of years haunting this place has a great reputation as far as ghosts go of driving people mad and into the hills. It has no impact on this family because they're Americans and they are steeped in commercialism and newness. They don't really have any response to him other than like, you need to oil your chains because making this kind of clatter at night is unacceptable. So that's kind of the setup for this story. And this poor ghost, you come to really sympathize with him, even though he's done awful things and he died because he did something heinous. It's basically a humorous story, but there's also very meaningful points to it. And I think ultimately, Emily, you said you put the moral of the story. What was your take on the moral of the story?
Yeah, we'll see if you guys agree with me. I listened to this, I should say, narrated by Arthur Lane via YouTube, which was kind of cool. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I wrote the moral is, what is life? What does death signify? And love is stronger than both.
Very deep.
Deep thoughts with Emily Fine.
It's like the spin-off show.
Yes.
Oh, my God. Thoughts?
I liked it a lot. Like you said, it was very different tonally, and this was the order that I read the stories in as well. I liked that, it was a little bit frightening. It was very, very funny, and as Chris said, it ultimately was really poignant. And I hadn't read the story before. I'm not even sure I've ever read Oscar Wilde before, so that was kind of an introduction for me, but it made me remember probably like 20 or 25 years ago, I think I saw a movie version of this, and Neve Campbell was in it, like way back at the beginning of her career, and you all know that she's my boo. You see what I did there. And I think that Patrick Stewart played the ghost, so it was kind of cool to revisit the story that I had completely forgotten because all I remember is like Neve Campbell. But it was a fun story, and I have to say I laughed out loud because there are these kids in the story who decide that they're going to, scare the ghost that's trying to scare them. And literally at one point they jump out and they scream boo at a ghost, and he's absolutely terrified. And I thought that was hysterical.
Yeah.
Yes, it's these twins, because the family moves in. They have 4 children, and 2 of them are twins, and they just are roustabouts that just are trying to get in this ghost's craw and doing a pretty good job of it.
Yeah, they're typical twins. So the kids, it's a very patriotic family too. So the oldest son is named Washington, after Washington. The 2 boys, they're not named, but they're referred to as the Stars and Stripes. And then the daughter is named Virginia, which, after the first colony, right? So there's that whole issue of patriotism. And the father, we should say, is a minister, of the United States. The mother doesn't really play much of a part. She's a stay-at-home mom at this time period, right? But the 2 twins play that role of being the over boyish American boys who are getting into trouble. in this case, kind of like good trouble, I guess you could say.
Right.
But oh my gosh, so many laugh out loud moments. Like there's this blood stain that's been on the floor forever. And we should say the housekeeper came with the place. The woman who's been the housekeeper for decades stays with them. And so they see this blood stain in front of the fireplace. And she's like, oh no, that has always been here, that, can't be removed. And one of the boys whips out, I forget the name of it, but
I wrote it down. Ready?
Good. What? Yeah.
Pinkerton's Champion Stain Remover.
Right. So like he whips
laugh.
out this thing and he wipes off the blood, right? And the blood, of course, reappears every night. But then, the father has a named oil that he gives to the ghost to oil his change. So like there's that commercialism aspect of Americans where we have products that we believe in, and really, really funny.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Virginia, who's, the daughter character, and she really is the only one in the family who's very respectful, of the ghost, and actually takes the time to get to know him and to figure out, why he's haunting this house and doing the things that he's doing, and maybe what she can do to help, set him free. So it is that contrast of fun and frivolity, and then something much more meaningful and poignant with the relationship that they develop.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about this story, when I've been reflecting on it, it is so full of stereotypes. Everything is a stereotype, but it works so well together because it's humorous. It's deep. Like Virginia is a stereotypical 19th century girl heroine who's kind and considerate, doesn't tell anyone that the ghost has been stealing her colors to the point where she can only paint moonlit scenes at this point. So she offers him redemption because she does the emotional work. So like, if you want to look at this story through the lens of gender, she's doing the emotional work for this man who is a murderer and haunting people for hundreds of years. And I thought, isn't that fascinating? But it worked, like I was along for the story and the ride, and I thought that was beautiful that, there's this redemption at the end, but then at the same time, he did do something awful. But how long does somebody have to suffer for what they've done?
Right. So he did really bad things, and really bad things were done to him. But, you brought up sort of the gender stereotyping, and we should mention, that he did murder his wife, and it was because she was a terrible tailor and couldn't cook,
Exactly.
So, her domestic deficiencies led to her demise.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's apparently her blood stain probably that reappears. And that is so funny, just the way the colors change. And then you find out why they change, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like he's taking the colors, and so every time the stain appears, it appears differently.
Yeah. And then the thing is, like, so he's haunting this place. Like, and that's a fun thing to learn about, is why is a ghost haunting a place? And you find out that he murdered his wife in this place, but then her brothers walled him up in the basement, in the cellar, and they chained him to the wall with food and water just out of reach. So he slowly starved to death.
Right. So he was punished for his act, and now it haunts this mansion where he lives. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I should say that my moral included Virginia, but I didn't want to have any spoilers, but that Virginia learns that love is stronger than both, because she does really play the key role of a turning point for the story that Chris has talked about already.
Well, whoops, we spoiled everything.
Yes, well, that's okay. That's what we're here to do. One of the things that I thought was just important to point out, too, is that in reading this, I saw some of the commonalities that we've been seeing in ghost stories. And one of them was like, this Otis is the name of the guy, the American. He's told that the house is haunted, and he's like, nah, doesn't matter. We don't believe in ghosts, which we've seen in many of the ghost stories that we've read.
Yeah.
I said he was warned, but he bought Canterville Chase, which is the name of the place that they bought. The other thing, and John, I don't know, we didn't ask you where you got your copy, but the Project Gutenberg copy that I printed had a lot of really lovely drawings that went along with it that showed, the Virginia, and it showed pictures of the twins gazing at the blood stain on the carpet. So I really appreciated that part of the story as well.
Yeah, the one I downloaded from Gutenberg had these illustrations as well. This is one of the ghosts he starts writing satirical remarks on some of the photographs that the American family has hung throughout the place. They've taken down his ancestral portraits and stuff. So he's going around doing that type of thing. I mean, this is just so charming. You know, like John, I laughed out loud when I was reading this, and I just think it's a brilliant story.
Yeah, it was great. It packed a lot for 25 pages or whatever it was. I will say I did not have the benefit of those illustrations. I feel like I chose wrong. But I mean, when you buy a $3 book, what can you really expect? I was thinking I can read these and then I can put them in the little free library and everyone benefits. But now I'll just probably go out and buy more copies and spend more money because that's what I do.
And the illustrations are by Wallace Goldsmith. And this edition that I read from Project Gutenberg was from 1906. So I don't know if that's like one of the most famous editions of this because of the illustrations, but they were a nice touch.
Yes, indeed.
That's interesting too with things being in like public domain. I found it like really difficult to figure out what edition I was actually going to get, which is sort of why I went with the Dover ones, because I'm like, oh, at least I know it's like reputable, But yeah, these stories have been around a long time, but I think they hold up a lot better than some of the ones I've read in my years.
I agree. Yeah.
I agree. And I thought they were great to read together. And I really agreed with your comment, John, about the Mask of the Red Death. Having, just lived through a plague, this would have read a lot different if we had gotten together to talk about it in 2019.
Right.
So as always, reading things, the time and the place of when you read them really matter. And I think reading them together was perfect because I think I appreciated the humor in the Canterville Ghosts more because I too read The Mask of the Red Death first, and then it was like a breath of fresh air to have the story with some humor.
It was a great palate cleanser. So I don't know which of you chose these stories, but good job.
I think it was Chris.
Good job, Chris.
Thank you very much. I'll pat myself on the back here. But again, these are on our Ghost Bingo card. So look at that, 2 squares.
Yes. John, can we put you on the spot? If you already mentioned a book that you just read for the criminal element piece that you're working on. If there's 1 or 2 others you want to mention, we'd love to hear it if that's putting you on the spot.
I figured this was going to happen, so I wrote one down because I'm like, I know, people are going to want at least 1 or 2 suggestions. Yes. But I just read, it's probably one of my favorite books of the year, and I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it. I think it comes out early October. But it's called The Autumn Springs Retirement Home Massacre by Philip Fracassi, I believe his name is. And I know, you get an idea of what this story is from the title because the title is very evocative. But then you read the book and it's like so much deeper and nuanced. I mean, yes, it's a slasher, but it's funny because the final girl is literally an elderly lady in her 70s, so she's like the final girl, golden girl, and she's living in this retirement community, and then death strikes again and again and again, and all the people around her just want to say, well, this was an accident, and that was a suicide, and come on, death happens here all the time because you're old people in an old folks' home, and she's like, no, there's something more ominous going on, and it turns out that she's right, and as the story goes on, death becomes much more violent and obvious, but the character is so great because she has, such a complex makeup and background that we learn about as the story goes on that you realize she's really struggling. Should I leave? Should I stay? Because this is my home now. These are my people. These are my friends. And this is happening to us. And if we don't make a stand, who's going to? Mm-hmm. So it's funny because you think it's going to be like the stereotypical slasher, and it is, and it isn't. It's just so much more complex. And I absolutely loved it because it was frightening. It was funny. I found it really, really original. I mean, I felt like it was almost sort of like the Thursday Murder Club, but taken up to a more horror-esque type of thing. And I'd never read the author before. It was kind of on a lark. But like I said, at this point, it's probably one of the most memorable books that I've read this year. So if people are looking for a little something spooky, that would be one of my recommendations.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
That's great.
Sounds really good. And now the door behind John just opened a little bit. So I don't know if that was a ghost or if that's a sign that we have to wrap it up.
Did you see that? Oh, that was the cat who, deciding if he either needs water or the box. Both my eyes are watering soon. You'll know what she chose.
Did you have another one, or was that the one you wanted to tell us about? You said you had a couple.
Well, I will say, too, people know that I really like books on the craft of writing. And so I did read one by Josh Mallerman, and I hope I don't mangle the title, but it's called Watching Evil Dead, Unearthing the Radiant Artist Within. And it's probably the most unique, book on craft that I've read in a very long time. And it's kind of like the sex, drugs, and rock and roll version of a book on craft because he's also a musician. The book basically opens with him having public sex with the woman who becomes his wife in a building that's connected to the production of Evil Dead. And then he has this experience of watching Evil Dead with his then girlfriend, who, like I said, becomes his wife. And she'd never seen it before. So it was something that they experienced together with some of their friends. And so he's watching her have this revelatory experience. But then the entire time he's sort of having this internal dialogue about creativity. And he's sort of haunted by the question of what does an artist deserve? And so he's grappling with that question the entire time they're watching these movies. And it's interesting because he'd been writing for several decades before he had a book deal. He was literally just writing to write. Like, he was touring with his band, and they would be in the van or in a hotel or whatever, and he would be handwriting novels, and then he would put the manuscripts aside. And 20 years later, he literally had like a stack of manuscripts, and then he sold Bird Box, which became huge, and then it was turned into a film with Sandra Bullock. And then he had to grapple with that because all of a sudden he's taking something that was very personal to him and he's making it public. And so he's a public figure, a public persona. People now know him as an author of a book, and he has to come with terms with that. So I just thought it was a really interesting angle to tell a story from. And also, given his background, in the arts, which is also visual arts, music, writing. So it was different than most I've read. I enjoyed that. I think he narrates the audio, so I'm looking forward to listening to it at some point because I really like it when artists then read their work. So that might be one that I sort of experience in both realms.
That sounds great. And he has a new novel coming out because I remember us looking at it possibly for Q4 read-along, but I don't remember what it's called. We'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, he's very prolific.
Yeah, we'll put all of this in the show notes.
Last year, when I spoke to Patricia Cornwell, she told me that she would be writing her version of a ghost story for Scarpetta 29, which turns out to be October's Sharp Force. And let me tell you, the premise of this book is creepy as you-know-what. Basically, there's a serial killer known as the Phantom Slasher who is terrorizing Northern Virginia unabated, striking on holidays and leaving very little, if any, evidence behind, which makes Scarpetta's job incredibly difficult. But more disturbing still is the fact that he sends a ghost-like apparition, a hologram, to stalk his victims before he moves in for the kill. And this ghost-like thing has beaming red eyes, can play creepy horror music, and this is how the victims know that they're marked for death. So, it's not exactly Dickens, but it is in that tradition of ghost stories set at Christmas because this book does play out over the Christmas holiday, which amplifies everything. And I had the privilege of again interviewing Patricia Cornwell about this book, and I'm happy to say that will run in the winter issue of the Strand magazine, which is actually the first time I've contributed anything there but book reviews. So it seemed appropriate, don't you think? There's a ghost story that's timely and has the benefit of cutting-edge technology.
Thank you, John, for letting us put you on the spot. Thank you for reading some spooky ghost stories with us. We really appreciate it. It's great to see you.
Oh my gosh, it was good to see you. Thanks again for the invitation. Like I said, I feel like I probably would have missed these otherwise, so it was just perfect, and it is the perfect time of year. Read it with your pumpkin spice coffee in hand, right, Chris?
Yes, indeed. Thanks for listening to The Book Cougars with Chris Wallach and Emily Fine. We'll be back again with another episode in 2 weeks. Until then, come chat with us on social media, Goodreads, or email us at bookcougars@gmail.com. If you'd like to help support our podcast, please tell others about us, leave a review wherever you listen, and consider becoming a patron. Even $1 a month is a big help. Learn more about that on our website, bookcougars.com, where you'll find the show notes for this and all of our past episodes.
Thanks, everybody.
This episode was edited by Pat Keogh Sound Design.